friends, welcome to my channel. So in the today's lecture, we are going to discuss what is serial schedule. Okay, so I have already told you that at a one particular point of time, we have a lot of transactions to be executed at a one particular point of time. Okay, so if you take the example of airline reservation system. So in airline reservation system, at a one particular point of time, how many number of people book their seats? Okay, so they are all doing online transactions. Okay, they are transferring money from their account to the airline's account. So at a one single point of time, we have a many number of transactions to be executed. Okay, so what is the meaning of serial schedule? So all these four transactions wants to get executed as fast as possible. Okay, we have four users. One user corresponding to one transaction. We have four people who are doing transactions, online transaction. They all want their transaction to be processed as fast as possible. Okay, no user wants to wait. Okay, so what serial schedule says? Serial schedule says that we are going to process all these transactions serially, like one after another. Okay, all these four transactions are going to be processed serially. Like firstly, I am executing all of the instructions of this transaction T1. Then I am going to execute all of the instructions of this transaction T2. Then I am executing all the instructions of transaction T3. This way, serially, like one after another. Okay, once your one transaction has been processed completely, only then we will be moving to the next transaction. This is what our serial schedule. Okay, so but the problem that we have to face in this serial schedule is that the waiting time is more. Users has to wait for a long amount of time. Okay, let's suppose we scheduled all these four transactions in this order, like T1, T2, T3, T4. Okay, we are getting four transactions at the same time. So I am storing all these four transactions in a queue like this. They all want to execute at the same time. Okay, but we have only one CPU. So we can execute only one transaction at a time. We cannot process all these four transactions at a time. Okay, so I am keeping all these four transactions in a queue and I am executing all these four transactions one by one. So the disadvantage of using serial schedule is that user has to wait for a long amount of time. When your transaction possible. Okay, so this user 4 has to wait for a long period of time because its transaction is going to be executed at the last. So we are having a starvation in this serial schedule. Okay, so we don't prefer to wait for a long time. So that is the reason that we don't prefer serial schedule much. Okay, we are moving ourselves from serial schedule to the non-serial schedule. Okay, we are moving from serial to non-serial schedule. In non-serial schedule, the response time, the first time response is going to be faster of all the transaction. Okay, so in non-serial schedule, the first time response of all of the transaction is going to be faster. Okay, but in serial schedule, to get the first response time, users has to wait for a long amount of time. I have discussed this non-serial schedule in the next video very clearly. Okay, we execute multiple transactions in a parallel mode in this non-serial schedule. Okay, in the next video we will be discussing that how we can execute multiple number of transactions in a parallel mode so that we can reduce the response time of the users, especially the first response time. Okay, so now let me discuss some example of serial schedule. So in serial schedule, we execute all of the transactions one by one. But in non-serial schedule, we execute multiple number of transactions parallelly. Okay, like we have these two transactions. We have to execute both these transactions at the same time. Okay, and we have, let's suppose, 5 instructions in this transaction and we have 4 instructions in this transaction. So if we have to execute both these transactions serially, so what we will be doing? We will be firstly executing all of the instructions of transaction T1, then we will be moving to transaction T2 and execute all of the instructions of this transaction. This is basically your serial schedule. And what is non-serial schedule? Non-serial schedule means you are not executing all of the instructions of transaction T1. You are executing some of the instructions of transaction T1, then you are switching to transaction T2. Okay, you execute some of the instructions of transaction T2, then you again switch back to transaction T1. So in this, if you look at, we are giving response to the transaction very faster. Okay, so that is the advantage of using non-serial schedule. In the next video, we will be discussing the concurrency, or you can call it as a non-serial schedule in a detailed manner. Okay, so now let me give you one example of serial schedule. Let's suppose I have 3 transactions which want to execute at the same time. Okay, we have 3 transactions which at the same time. So, how many ways we can arrange these three transactions? Okay, so we can execute like this: T1, T2, T3. This is the first case. What can be the other way to execute all these three transactions? T1, T3, T2. Okay. Next, what can be the other possible way? T2, T1, T3. Okay. T2, T3, T1. Okay. So, these are the four possible ways. And we can make two more ways to arrange all these three transactions. Okay. T3, T1, T2. Then T3, T2, T1. Okay. If we have to execute these three transactions, we can arrange these three transactions in these 6 ways. Okay. So, 6 ways are possible. 6 serial schedules are possible. And I ask you that how many number of serial schedules are possible from these 3 transactions. How we will be calculating it? Okay. So, in mathematics, if you have studied the permutation and combination chapter, okay, what we studied in the permutation? So, permutation tells you the number of ways of arrangement. Okay. So, I can apply here permutation. I have to find the number of possible ways to arrange these 3 transactions. That how many number of ways we can arrange these 3 transactions. So, what is going to be my answer? 3 factorial. Okay, I have 3 number of transactions, so the answer is 3 factorial. 3 into 2 is equal to 6. Okay, it is going to tell you that how many number of ways we can arrange our 3 transactions. Okay, if I am given 4 transactions, I want to find the possible ways in which we can arrange these 4 transactions. How we will be calculating? 4 factorial. Okay, 4 into 3 into 2. It is equivalent to 24. Okay, so I hope that you are clear with serial schedule. If you have any query, I have mentioned my email ID in the description box. You can contact me on that email ID. So if you like my video, please like, share and subscribe my channel.